The showers to come are especially around Irish Sea coast, western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. 1 or 2 drifting into the Midlands. But temperatures in many places a degree or so higher compared with Saturday, because we'll have lost that northerly airflow. We're replacing it with more of a westerly airflow. And that trend continues into Monday. I think lots of cloud out there, most places dry, and temperatures will be ticking up a degree or so higher compared with Sunday.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Philip.
Following the death of Her Majesty, we'll bring you the latest as we come to terms with a life in Britain under a new monarch.
The wait to see the Queen line in state is now nearing capacity, with the expected wait time around 16 hours. Officials have now asked the public not to travel to join the queue.
Later today, the Prince of Wales and Duke of Sussex will observe a 15-minute vigil for their late grandmother. Both princes will be dressed in full military uniform as requested by the King.
The funeral on Monday could be the largest event the UK has ever hosted, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to be on the streets of London alongside high-profile guests, including US President Joe Biden. We'll be joined by a representative from the police force to discuss what they're expecting on Monday.
And please continue to share your fond memories of the Queen and let us know in the usual way. That's emailing us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
We're delighted to be joined in the studio by royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin and member of the London Assembly, Sean Bailey. Sean, welcome. Angela, welcome.
Thank you.
Sean, I just wondered what had caught your eye in the coverage this week?
I think there's a number of things that's caught my eye. Firstly, it's just the outpouring of love. Everybody has sort of worldwide has said what a wonderful person the Queen was and impact she's had on Britain and world history. But within that, there's been a little niggle, mostly led by the New York Times, which has a bizarre history of British bashing and really seemed to step that up since the Queen has passed away, which I think is a real shame. But I think we need to look at two things when it comes to British bashing. Where is it coming from, who's doing it, and what's the motivation? And if you look at the editor in particular, he spent a long time as the Chinese editor, and I think he may have picked up 1 or 2 views about Britain and Europe and the rest of the world, quite frankly, which isn't true. And he's paying those out now. And I think secondly, and probably more poignantly, they're trying to sell newspapers, aren't they? They've got to a point, I think, where their membership has plateaued, and they've decided that bashing Britain means they can sell a few more papers here, but more importantly for them, in places like China and Iran, I think they're trying to sell subscriptions.
I think the interesting thing about the New York Times is that Mark Thompson, who was the former Director General of the BBC, left the BBC to go and be the President and Chief Executive of the New York Times, and he was there from 2012 to 2020. Now, he's not there now, I hasten to add, but the fact that the Director General of the BBC went to the New York Times probably tells you all you need to know about the outlook of the world for the New York Times, to be perfectly
And I think the number of inaccuracies, and I think the in proper sort of, I would say, journalism. And I think many people have pointed out how many things have been inaccurate in the paper. But I think the just uncaringness when they talked about the Queen's cousin, Lord Mountbatten, being murdered by the IRA, and they were calling it as karmic. Well, you can imagine Norman Tebbit had a quote straight away, whose wife had, was paralysed by the IRA, and he said, "We always knew that New York Times was anti-British, but this seems particularly egregious in the wake of the Queen's death." And then he finished it off with, "It's this sort of scum that rises to the top of dirty water." So he wasn't pulling his punches there, was he, Norman Tebbit?
Now, Angela, the thing that struck me about the coverage this week, actually, funnily enough, I saw an article in another US paper, the Washington Post, which was, "Can Charles be the King of Hearts?" was the headline. And because all the polls from a few weeks and months ago showed that the Queen was miles more popular than Prince Charles as he was then, and there was a concern about whether or not the royal family would still maintain the same level of support with Charles as king. But the thing that struck me, not just about the coverage in the papers, but just from the crowds that we've seen everywhere, all parts of the United Kingdom, just how popular Charles and the Queen Consort Camilla seemed to be. And all of those people who sort of feared that actually the monarchy could be in trouble once Charles inherited the throne and Camilla became Queen Consort, those fears appear now to be disappearing, don't they? They've had such a hectic schedule, and I think everything shows that the King Charles and the Queen Consort Camilla are going to follow in the same dutiful footsteps as Charles's mother in terms of putting the country and duty above their own sort of personal grief at this moment in time.
Yes, I found that was exactly the thing that happened when he and the Queen, I don't like calling her Queen Consort, it seems a bit derogative, but the Queen arrived back at Buckingham Palace, and you thought they'd go in straight away from emotional exhaustion, instead of which they got out and they went to speak to so many people who were queuing there and looking at him and being so respectful. And I thought that it was a way of him saying, I am going to continue what my mother's done. I want to be like her, but I'm obviously me. So I want to share with you what I'm like, and I hope we can do this together. Because, of course, any monarch needs everybody in the population. And I thought that this was also exactly what Camilla has been doing for some time, in that wherever she goes, she wants ordinary people there. She goes towards them, and she thinks that they give back what you really need, and that is popularity and love. And I saw in this piece by Andrew Neil in the Mail today, and he's sort of done exactly the same as happened the day before from Tom Utley, whereas if you were somebody who felt that you'd lost a contact with what's happened to Britain, that people hated the monarchy, that people couldn't wait to get rid of it. And then this happened, the response of the ordinary people about the Queen. I mean, it's full of love, it's full of caring. And they're not saying, we miss her. Of course, they're very sorry, but they are grateful that she was alive for them. And they're happy, they need Prince Charles to follow. And here Andrew Neil says, he thought it was it was a dismissive, racist, nasty hellhole. But he said, this is the Britain of all classes, regions and ethnicities, shuffling along the banks of the Thames together in harmony and shared grief. And I think we're all in it, and we all feel we're grieving, but we also want somebody who will look after us. People have said when they're going in to see the coffin that they wanted people who that they reminded them of their grandmother or their great-grandmother or their mother, and they were very much a symbol of how they should be. And I think they want exactly the same from Charles.
And really, the queue has also become the story as well.
Yes.
Everybody, I think it's gone more than a queue. I think it has become a pilgrimage in a way. If you look at the number of people there, and you know, the queue named now the Elizabeth line, or the queue to queue has now been known as the QE2. So it's got its own names, it's got its own form. Friendships are being found there. So I think this symbolises, as you rightly say, Angela, the country coming together of all types, of all backgrounds. You know, whether it's celebrities there, whether it is, you know, MPs, ministers, whether it's, you know, people from the NHS, whether it's charity workers, whatever, we've all come together because she was this symbol of stability.
And it's not...
Sorry.
Sorry, Angela. I was just going to say, it's not just the country, is it? It's, Sean, it's the Commonwealth as well. And the fact that all the Commonwealth have come together as well.
I think the queue in and of itself is now its own entity. I mean, it's so big it can officially be seen from space. It's officially the longest queue there's ever been.
We are now the best in the world of queuing.
We always have been.
We knew it, but we officially are. We can be seen from space queuing.
We've demonstrated to everybody in the entire universe that we are the best at queuing. But I think more importantly, what the queue has symbolised is that actually people do like this country and we are not falling apart.
Yeah.
The version of the world of Britain that the New York Times is trying to give simply isn't true. People in Britain see it very differently. And if you're sometimes on an angry left and you're constantly talking about Britain in decline, actually this demonstrates something very powerfully. British people like the British nation. Are we perfect? Of course not. But we're the best by some way, and people are demonstrating that. And the human interactions in the queue are incredible, and so is the symbolism as well. I think that has to be said. And on top of that, it again points to the Queen's legacy. To see the Sussexes down visiting troops from different nations across the Commonwealth is so powerful, because that reminds you, this doesn't just happen in Britain, it happens worldwide. And a strong part of the legacy is the future, the modern future that the Commonwealth will now bring forward.
And how important is that, that they're taking part in the ceremony? Well, you've got New Zealand over here, you've got the Canadian Mounties here, you've got Australia here, and they're going to be part of that ceremony.
I think it's also the end of COVID, where we've all been isolating. We haven't wanted to go out. We haven't wanted to be part of a sort of social life. And here we've got everyone who's friendly, as you say in the queue. So many times you see people making friends there, which they say, oh, no, we're going to keep them. And it's sort of we're coming out and being normal again and appreciate the kindness. There's no nastiness about it. It's all kind and helping each other and having very similar views. How many times do you think in this country we've had people with the same views? There's been thousands of them all going there with exactly the same feeling about it. And I think it's so positive for this country. I don't think we'll be the same again, actually. I think it's opened us up.
The thing is, the thing that struck me is that we're used to hearing from the social media people who don't really represent anybody apart from themselves. The queue has been the silent majority of this country. That's basically... I mean, you never normally hear from the silent majority. Right. And the only time we've heard from the silent majority has been this week. We've had Tom Harwood out during the week speaking to people in the queue.
Yeah, GBNews have covered that queue brilliantly.
It's been absolutely terrific listening to people, and that is the view of the silent majority, and you never get to hear those views normally.
The powerful thing that GBNews did when the passing of the Queen was originally announced, they went straight out the street and started speaking to people. And they went to Buckingham Palace and they spoke to 2 young black boys. And it was incredible watching those 2 black boys say, well, listen, the Queen is important to everybody. And they really spoke into what has now become the story of the past of Queen Elizabeth II. But the most important thing about the queue and the conversation we're having now, there is many tough conversations coming down the line around the changes in the world, who will stay in the Commonwealth, who won't, but they'll start from a point that we now understand that we like Britain. Britain's a great place. Our past isn't perfect, but our future can be, as long as we come together on that, and I think it's a great start point.
And you've seen we'll call them all the consorts, as it were, the plus ones, where the women are in the royal family here coming to the forefront. Sophie, you've seen Kate, we've seen them there coming forward. The only person, I guess, where it has been, and I think the crowd were a bit uncomfortable at times, weren't they? When Meghan was going out and people were not sure whether to shake hands or not. And that was just because of these interviews with Oprah Winfrey, these interviews for Netflix. And they're like, you know, this is the Queen we love. And you've made that relationship a little bit uncomfortable for us.
Yes, I think there's a lot of bitterness there. And it'll be very interesting to see how the effect of this changes that sort of bitterness and resentment, because the King is now doing everything he can to make sure that they are involved at the right level, which is, you know, his son, the second to...
Made sure he wore a uniform, or can wear a uniform, saying he must.
And I think actually the important thing is, I don't mind about uniforms or anything, it's what you say, not what you do. And I think that we've been so hurt by what both of them have said, particularly about the Queen. We've wanted to protect her, but now we can talk about it, that we do feel sorry, and we want to protect the King.
But wouldn't this be a great time, really, for the family to come together? This is an important thing. It could be the time for Harry to say, you know what, I was going to write that book. I've delayed it. No, I'm not. I'm going to get rid of the book. I'm going to scrap the book. And that could be them coming together. And they must realise the love now around the world. And they would have a position, Meghan and Harry, in the Commonwealth. They could come back. Maybe, I feel now, the Queen would want that, the King would want that.
All things are possible if, particularly Meghan, changes direction. I think if from a sort of very hard point of view, she should realise why people are interested in her as her link to the royal family. She shouldn't break that link. She needs to think about the future of her children. They're not just her children, they're somebody's grandchildren. They're linked to a family. She needs to think about that as well. But on a very personal level, this, I hope, will give her pause to think about a change in direction. I would be surprised pleasantly if the book didn't come out. That would be a real revelation. Because you imagine a conversation with a publisher saying, actually, you've invested all this money, and I imagine a publisher saying, well, I'd like my advance back, all those kind of things. But I think it would be a time to come together, because the important thing that Harry and Meghan have to understand, you cannot really attack the Queen or the King without attacking the whole country. And I think that's where that uneasiness came from.
Well, we were talking about the queue, and here we go. Waiting times are now expected to be around 16 hours for those paying tribute to the Queen. And our reporter, Jeff Moody, is in the queue for us. So how are you, Jeff, and whereabouts are you currently?
I'm right at the very beginning. We've just arrived here. I set off from home at 5:30 this morning, and when I set off, it said that it was 25 hours in the queue, and I was thinking, I don't know whether I can do 25, and now it's gone down to 16 or 15 hours. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I can probably just about do that. So yeah, we're right at the very beginning of the queue here. As you can see, there's all of the barricades here, and people going at quite a lick, to be honest. It's quite a speed at this early stage. I don't know whether it'll carry on like this all around. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. I haven't got the most sensible shoes on, but I'm determined to do it. I'm determined to get all the way, and I'm going to report back when I've done it. I'm going to come to the studio and tell you my experiences. I'm not doing it alone. My friend Mary is here. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Jeff.
How's it going so far for you?
Well, it's a beautiful morning, so I'm feeling very optimistic we're going to make it to the end.
What made you decide to do this today?
I wanted to be here with everybody else. It feels like such a national coming together out of all the divisions recently, so I just want to be part of it.
And James, a monumental day today, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a stream of people, non-stop really, but yeah, a huge day to be part of.
Well, it's a huge day. It's also going to be a very long day. I'm looking forward to that camaraderie that I've heard develops on these routes. So I'm going to hand back to you, and we're going to get back in the line and start our long journey. But we'll be checking in with you guys throughout the day and possibly throughout the night.
Excellent.
Jeff, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Get in that queue. Don't miss your place in the queue. We wish you all
Right,
the
it'll
very
be
best.
more than 16 hours.
He's smiling now because he's at the start. Let's see what he's like in about 10 hours' time. Let's see if he's still smiling then. Jeff, thanks very much.
Now, I've got a question for you, Angela, because I think you'll know this better than anybody else. Now, second son always seems a difficult position in the royal family, so we've seen what's happened to Andrew, we now see what's happened with Harry. Is this a coincidence, or is it a difficult role to play, being second son, when everything goes to the first who becomes king?
It was Princess Margaret as well, who had a lot of time being second to Queen Elizabeth. Well, when I did my biography of Harry in 2018, we talked about this. And when he was young, it was very, very difficult because William knew what was going to happen, and he would be a bit sort of, well, I'm going to be king, not really knowing quite what that meant. But it didn't help that the Queen Mother, wonderful in many ways, she would invite William over to tea to start talking about it gently, but wouldn't let Harry come. And I think that's very difficult. And there was probably a grievance there that's lasted a long time. But he also said when he wanted to leave the royal family, before he'd met Meghan, he wanted to go to Africa and look after animals that were, you know, losing the numbers and all that sort of thing. He said that he felt that his job was to help William be king because it's such an almighty effort, and that he decided that he would not go because that would be his job. And at the same time, the Queen had passed on lots of engagements to him because she was 90 and she couldn't manage them. So he felt he would really stay here and that would be his role. And I think it is very difficult because you know you can never beat them. You might beat them with a running, you might beat them at academics, which of course was not Harry's best thing, but you can't beat him that I am going to be king. So it's very difficult, but they also can't just go and work. They're in between two very different areas of life.
So he must be heartbroken himself now if he thought he was going to help his brother be king, and now they're barely speaking.
No, because I think he's changed so much that in his Oprah Winfrey interview, he called them trapped. He called his father was trapped, and he said that Prince William was trapped, and he said he was trapped, but he didn't realise until he met Meghan, and that she's released him from all that. But actually, he looks trapped in another way, frankly, if you're asking me.
Yeah, I'd agree. Look, I remember when he's in the armed forces, there was a comfort in him. He seemed to really enjoy it. He had a purpose, he had a role, he was very good at it, he was well-liked, and he spent a lot of time saying to people, don't treat me like a royal, treat me like a soldier. And I think in that world, they achieved that. Once that had come to an end, I think he may have been all at sea again. And I think that the advent of Meghan changed his mind again. I think she gave him concept that he may have not really considered before. And in this big freedom that he thought he was going to find, I think he'll find now that he's trapped.
But he says he doesn't want it then, and he talks about trapped. But Meghan and he have had quite tasteless conversations about the fact that they want the HRH for Archie and Lilibet. So you can't say you don't want it, and then you do.
You can't
I've got to say, for Archie and Lilibet, they should be HRH, because any of us, we're not just our parents' children, we're part of our family. And if your father or mother makes a mistake, should your grandchildren suffer for that? That's a question, isn't it?
I don't think so at all, because I think the important thing of HRH is, one, you get lots of protection. That's why they want it, really. But if you've got no involvement with the royal family, if you don't know where they are, you never come and see it, you've got no idea of what's needed. I think anyone in the royal family, whatever generation they are, must know that it's all about giving, it's all about duty, it's about, you know, not thinking about yourself, but helping the monarchy. And I don't think there's a chance that that's going to happen. And I think it's completely wrong to give it to that.
What I'm saying is, if they become working members of the family, the door should be held open. So when they're adults or older, if they want to become members, they can be, and whatever titles are given to them. I do accept they shouldn't be given now, but because their parents made a mistake, they shouldn't be denied the lineage of their family.
Well, not if their parents are going to use the title for their own gain, I'm afraid to say.
Well, I'm going to end on a little high here on this sort of paper review that we're doing today, because the only story all week has been the royal family, and it is about what has been described as a cosmic boomerang. The stars are in the right place. Everything is correct. It's celestial events that many have interpreted as having a deeper meaning, and this is a heavenly occasion for wonderful events like this, and seem to be a wonderful portent for King Charles coming forward.
That's what they said about, that's what Harry said about when he met Meghan. He said the stars were in the right place. My mother was in the right place. And that's, so, I mean, it's...
So you're not convinced by that then, Angela?
No.
I take it you're a bit cynical about this.
Angela, I was trying to say, look, this is the time. It's about coming together. It said, you know,
But coming
all of these
together,
things.
I agree with. I think we are absolutely coming together. That's when you see the people in the queue, all sorts of people making friends with people of different types and everything. That's a coming together, not
Oh,
a
well, then
star
maybe
in
you're
the
right.
sky.
I was hoping to extend that to the royal family themselves, but it has actually said here, brings a chance to create a more balanced, safer, fairer world as we all come together. I just wanted to say it.
If you trip over on Wednesday morning, there'll be some cosmic reason, according to some palm reader. I think the deeper thing is that I want us to all concentrate on is, yes, there is a coming together now, but let's prepare ourselves for when people on angry left try to pull us apart again. You know, we talked about the New York Times, and you're talking about someone who's anti-Brexit, anti-Britain, anti-all of us. Let's remember that we are a nation. We do like ourselves, and they will come after us, and we can defeat them if we're together.
And
I think we can
everybody
do that
wants
now.
to be
I think
there.
we've got the strength to do that, because I think you thought you were in the minority because the majority makes such a noise that you're not allowed to speak, you know, shout. There's only one way of thinking. But now we quietly know that we've got the same amount of power by being nice and calm and, more. Quite right, quite right.
And I think as well, and we'll come back and speak about this a little bit later, Angela, maybe what the Queen, you know, what say the Queen had in her own funeral arrangements. Because if you look at who's been invited, who'll be there on the ceremony there. So you've got people from charities, you've got NHS staff, you've got all of these people who were welcome, those who'd got honoured in the Queen's birthday list, and they'll all be there.
What I find absolutely extraordinary is the Queen. She helped us over Diana. She helped us hugely with the pandemic. And now, although she's no longer alive, she's still helped us make that step towards being nice, to being thoughtful, and to actually say what we feel without fear. And I think something's still hanging around us.
Angela, Sean, thank you very much for now. And I hope people are enjoying the photos, the camera shots there of Westminster Hall, with people continuing to file through Westminster Hall in their droves. And it is a fantastic building, as I think we can all see, in a fantastic historic moment.
And the royal household have had plans in place for the Queen's death for decades, but some things, like the continual demand for floral tributes, have put extreme pressures on wholesalers.
Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has caught up with flower sellers to find out more.
Most of them come from Holland. Probably 75% comes from Holland. We also bring from Africa, and we also bring from Colombia. We also bring from Italy. Basically, we bring from around the world, South America, all over.
George Crothers is the manager of one of Northern Ireland's largest flower wholesalers and explains just how tricky it has been to keep the tributes blooming.
Last week sort of caught us by surprise, obviously, because you can't really plan for something like this. A lot of our stuff has to be pre-ordered maybe 2 weeks in advance, the likes of carnations and spray carnations coming from Colombia. So we've had a very short supply of them because obviously, again, we can't plan 2 weeks in advance for a major event like this.
Even with the logistical hardship of keeping the market supplied, the price hasn't risen from 3 weeks earlier.
We sell by stem, not by bunch really. So stem price hasn't really gone up much because of the extra demand. So really they're not paying any more for flowers than they were last week or the week before. Just there's been more volume going out.
Inflationary pressures are there, and like so many others, costs have jumped over the last year, and that is down to one thing.
You're standing in the fridge which has to run 24/7. So we can't just say we can't cut costs by turning the fridge off because then we lose the product. So we still have to run our fridge 24/7, which runs on electricity. So we can't just turn the plugs off. We find our own electricity bills gone from 50,000 maybe a year to £100,000 a year. And these costs, what do we do? Where do you go?
It seems that not even the cost of living or the price at the checkout can stop many from saying goodbye.
Hopefully we'll be able to tell them in years to come that they were here and laid the flowers in memory of the Queen. Well, I just felt it was necessary to come to pay respects to our Queen, who has served us for so many years.
To be honest, I'm here to bring my son to take a little picture, so in years to come I can look back and say, you know, you were born the year of the Queen's Jubilee and when the Queen passed away. So it's just here to pay our respects and make a few little memories.
If you're wondering what will happen to this floral carpet, well, the tributes will be removed and sent to Buckingham Palace, while the flowers will be used for compost and put on the beds in and around Hillsborough Castle. Dougie BD.
Thanks, Dougie. Now, the Metropolitan Police have said the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth will be the biggest security operation it has ever undertaken.
On Monday, hundreds of thousands of people are expected to be on the streets of London alongside high-profile guests, including US President Joe Biden.
The policing operation is expected to surpass other major events, including that was the Olympic Games in 2012 and celebrations for the Queen's Diamond and Platinum Jubilee.
To discuss the event from a policing angle, we're delighted to be joined by the Deputy Chair of the Police Federation, Tiff Lynch. Tiff, thank you very much for joining us. Can you just give us a flavour of how big Monday is going to be for your police officers?
Good morning to you both, Boridar. Yes, the Police Federation, the police service in England and Wales have never experienced an operation of this magnitude. We're going to have expected of at least 10,000 police officers leading up to the day on Monday. And there are officers from all over the country, from Scotland, Wales, and obviously all of our officers from the 43 branches in the country.
And how big? How big an issue is it? The sort of protection of all these heads of state all coming into the country all at the same time. How difficult is that to police?
Absolutely massive, and it's not just the direct protection, it's what's happening in the background. We've got all of the services, so not just the police service, we've got the Secret Service, we've got all the volunteers that are all pulling together to make sure that our heads of state that are arriving into the country are protected, that our royal family is protected, and that our members of the public that are obviously wishing to go there and say their goodbyes are also protected.
I've also heard the SAS units are on standby as well.
I'm not party to all of the operation and the logistics of what's happening and who will be there, but I wouldn't be surprised if the SAS are around in the background.
And as you say, it's policing the country as well. So you have people like the British Transport Police who'll be making sure that people are getting to London and back home safely as well.
Absolutely. It's not, I want to also stress that it's not just the focus in London. We've got so many officers that are working long hours, working their rest days, and it's an absolute privilege for those officers to actually be down in London. But we've also got towns and cities across the UK where people are wanting to pay their respects, and policing will continue in those towns and cities, as well as the normal business.
I just wondered, Tiff, you know, people listening to you will be saying, well, you know, there's officers coming from Scotland and Wales and maybe Yorkshire and Greater Manchester and all the rest of it. How worried might people be about the lack of policing in their own areas over the next few days?
We can assure all of our public across the country that normal business in towns and cities will continue, and we will have the officers out there working, no different to the officers in London, long hours, cancelled rest days to ensure that our public are safe. And those officers feel that it's a privilege to actually do that.
And Tiff, whilst you're on, we can't not mention the horrific stabbings yesterday in central London, where 2 officers were stabbed carrying out their duty. And obviously, we send our sympathies to those officers and their families and their colleagues as well. I just wondered, how worrying is this a growing trend of violence that police officers are facing on our streets?
First of all, my thoughts go out to both officers and also the officers that were actually at the scene and their shift. This is a horrific incident that has occurred yesterday. Our officers go to work on a day-to-day basis, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, not expecting to not come home at the end of their shift. Violence towards police officers is increasing, and the level of violence is increasing, and it's not acceptable. We're in a period of mourning for our Queen, our sovereign, and our boss. The police officers in London and all over the country are wanting to ensure that the public can pay their respects quietly and respectfully. And all I would ask is that our police officers get the same in return.
No, absolutely. We completely agree. Is there anything that you, the Police Federation, would like to see the government or Parliament do to? I mean, we've been doing things like passing laws to create an offence of assaulting an emergency worker and things like that, and trying to toughen up the sentence on that. Is there anything further that the Police Federation would like to see the government do to help protect police officers?
There's lots that the government can do, and that's a discussion I would suggest is for another day whilst we're actually in this period of mourning. But what we would like to see, we have the Policing Covenant that has passed through under the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. We would like more emphasis in the support and the welfare and well-being of our officers and their families. And we have, obviously, the assaults on emergency workers. The sentencing was increased and we were grateful for that. But we would like to see the government supporting our emergency services. It's not just the police service that are assaulted in this way, it's all of our emergency services. And we would like further recognition for the duty that they actually go out and do.
Tiff Lynch, Deputy Chair of the Police Federation, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we wish all your officers well over the next few days in what is a huge, mammoth task that they have, and we salute the work that they do. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, well,
Thank
we're
you,
delighted
pass
to
that
say,
on.
Thank you. We're delighted to say that we're still joined in the studio by royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin and member of the London Assembly, Sean Bailey. So, Sean, listening there about those horrific attacks on police officers on the streets as they're trying to keep the public safe.
I think there's three things that need to be said. Firstly is we are really concerned about the welfare of those police officers and their colleagues and their families as well. I think that needs to be taken into account. Our thoughts and prayers with them. The second thing is, in London in particular, I think we need to do more to get weapons off the streets. Now, we don't know the full circumstances of this. To me, it sounds like there might be mental health or something involved. A member of the public got involved and helped the police. He threw his bag at him, apparently, and helped the police wrest him to the floor. But the real thing is here, we need to do more to get weapons off the streets of London. And here's the point I want to make. Lots of people, and I will use the term on the left, have been talking about civil unrest. They've almost been calling for it. This is a direct attack on the police because it ups the level of discontent on the street, and people feel like they can attack the police and it will go unpunished, etc., etc. So I think everybody, particularly on social media, needs to think twice before they go after the police, with no real point other than that they're upset. If the police have done something, of course, let's deal with them. But to attack the police is largely an attack on society, and it feels like, particularly in London, there's a feeling of lawlessness. You've seen incidences on Oxford Street where huge groups of young people have just walked up the street and looted shops as they're policed and stuff. That's about a breakdown of authority. We must help the police reinstate that authority to keep us all safe. And like I say, you never lose by taking weapons off the streets.
Sean, thank you very much for those thoughts. Let's just get a news update now with Alice Porter.
Good morning. It's 10:37. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Queen Elizabeth's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin in Westminster Hall later today. Last night, the Queen's children, King Charles, the Princess Royal and the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex held their own 15-minute vigil, honouring their mother. Prince Harry has been given special dispensation by his father to wear his military uniform, despite no longer being a working royal. Prince Andrew has been given the same permission. A man who approached the Queen's coffin is being questioned after he was arrested last night. The incident happened at about 10 p.m. Police also detained a man on rollerblades who was skating towards the King's motorcade as it made its way to Westminster Hall last night. Officers tackled him to the ground, but he was later released without charge. The wait time to see the Queen lying in state is now up to 16 hours. Thousands of people are queuing to pay their respects, hoping to file past her coffin ahead of the state funeral on Monday. The government has warned entry to the queue could again be paused if numbers increase dramatically. But those in line say it's worth the wait.
Travelled down from Yorkshire, north of England, yesterday for it, and we've been queuing all night long, kind of thing. So it's going to be nice but very emotional at the same time.
We've been waiting 10 hours. Yeah, and the atmosphere's been great.
Atmosphere's lovely.
Yeah.
We've met lovely people. It's been a little bit chilly at times. Got a bit cold, but not as bad as I thought it could be.
She's served so faithfully for 70 years, and so having to stand in line in the queue for likely 14 hours, really not that much, in comparison to what she did.
World leaders will start arriving in London later for the state funeral. Around 500 dignitaries from around the world are expected to attend, with US President Joe Biden and French leader Emmanuel Macron among them. Liz Truss will meet her New Zealand and Australian counterparts later today. The security operation is set to be the biggest in the Met Police Force's history, surpassing the London Olympics. Royal pageant master Bruno Peake says a lot's been done to prepare for the event.
Rehearsal side is the element that will 99.9% guarantee that you will have a successful event. And again, these guys and these ladies who are actually taking part, in the military, this will be such a proud moment for them. So they're going to be making sure that they don't put a step wrong.
In other news, Ukraine says the mass grave discovered in the eastern city of Izium is proof of Russia's war crimes. More than 500 bodies, most of them civilians, were found, some with their hands tied behind their backs. The city was recently liberated after 6 months of Russian occupation. The Kremlin denies it's targeting civilians or committing war crimes. But the White House says it'll continue to support Ukraine and hold Moscow accountable. This is what spokesman John Kirby had to say.
It's horrifying. It's repugnant. And sadly, it's in keeping with the kind of depravity and the brutality with which Russian forces have been prosecuting this war against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And we're going to continue to actively support efforts to document war crimes and atrocities that Russian forces commit in Ukraine and to assist national and international efforts to identify and hold Russians accountable.
Police investigators are looking at whether race was a factor in the fatal shooting of Chris Kaba by an armed officer in South London. The 24-year-old's family say they're angry that the investigation by the police regulator could take as long as 9 months. Mr. Kaba, who was unarmed, was killed following a police pursuit of his car 2 weeks ago. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Welcome back. We've been getting your views coming in thick and fast. Esther, what have you got?
I've got Jenny says he and Meghan are extremely jealous people. Their intention is to bring down the royal family and establish themselves as the most important royals in America. There's another Sussex camp PR storm on the way, directed by them.
And Deborah says, listening to your show, someone commented about how good it is to see all the positive things about this country and the monarchy that are coming out during this sad time. Hopefully the press will continue to show more positive press coverage about this country in future, rather than bad-mouthing it at every chance they get. GB News, who we have watched from the beginning, is different from the other channels and getting better and better with their unbiased opinions. Thank you, Deborah.
And Clive says, dear team, don't forget the millions outside London and surrounding areas who cannot make it to the capital to pay our respects to Her Majesty, or Her late Majesty. We are in financial crisis and people just cannot afford to go. So GB News is doing a fine job in keeping us up with all the latest news.
Thank you for those. Keep them coming. Now, Haworth in West Yorkshire has always been famous for the Bronte sisters, but it may soon be made even more famous by a company heavily involved in providing the uniforms that we've seen over the last week since the Queen passed away.
And we're delighted to say that we're joined by the managing director of that family business, Wydeen, Robin Wright. So let me just explain to people some of the things you do. 4 billion people have been watching this ceremony, the things that the Great Britain do well. You do the badges, you do the uniform accoutrements, as it's known, and that's the sashes, the epaulets, the belts, the sword slings, the spurs, and all of the items worn by those horses on ceremonial duties. So all of the equestrian things. So how on earth did you get to do this?
Well, it's a long story and it goes back around about 160 years, quite frankly. I've been involved with it the past 40 and we find ourselves making and supplying these products from our premises in Haworth, West Yorkshire. You've caught me on holiday, actually, so the backdrop is actually southwest Scotland, but not Haworth at all. There's no sea near us. But yes, it's a family business. We've been in Haworth for coming up to 60 years, and we are the prime contractors to the Ministry of Defence for ceremonial uniform accoutrement, and that basically is all the things that adorn uniforms. If you take all our bits and pieces off, you've got a plain tunic and a plain pair of trousers, but once you put the trouser striping on, all the gold braid, all the embellishments, basically it's rank, distinction, designation and decoration. And the gold braid, the accoutrement that is worn by the armed forces, that's what we supply.
Now, because you do hand-stitched badges and as well as the machine ones, and this actually is Princess Anne's own coat of arms that we're seeing here, which is being hand-stitched. So when people see those magnificent, as I said, badges, accoutrements, it's all done by you. And you can see how precise it is, how wonderful that detail is, whether it's silk, whether it is gold thread. Do you want to explain a little bit more about how it's done?
Well, as you can see there, it's done by hand. It's a very labour-intensive product, and this is why we had to take much of the production offshore about 25 years ago. So most of it now is done offshore. The hand work, that is, the stitching and the assembly work, but all the components and braids are made in our factory in Haworth. We have over 100 textile machines of different types which put these items together, and then we take them offshore to be stitched together. But hand embroidery is the predominant skill, and as you can see there, there's a lot of detail work involved in that, a lot of highly skilled people making that. But the picture there, that's a bandsman's wing, a drum major's wing, a musician, the drum major will wear that. There are 75 pieces of bullion all the way around that, top and bottom, so that's 300 bullions. Each bullion takes about 20 minutes to make. Medal ribbons there, of course. Every campaign has its own medal, so we weave all the medal ribbons in Haworth. And we are basically narrow fabric producers, braids, tapes, laces, cords, webbings and so on, which are then converted into belts and uniform accessories, or accoutrement is a word we like to use. But regalia, insignia, designation, distinction, decoration of uniforms, that's our bread and butter.
Phil?
Robin, I just wondered about if you could give us a sense of the pride that your employees have, seeing all of this merchandise being worn and being viewed around the world, and particularly your mother, because I understand your mother is the chairman of the company and she's, if I'm right, 97 years old, so she must have a particular affinity with the Queen, given their ages were so similar.
Indeed she does. We're all immensely proud of the products we make, and pretty much every news bulletin you'll see a piece of Wideen on it somewhere. But right now, particularly, all our wares are quite evident, and it makes us immensely proud to see them being portrayed on, but in such somber circumstances, of course. Yes, my mother is 97. She wouldn't like me to admit that, but she's. Of course, being 97, she actually remembers George V. In fact, she was quite close to George V and Queen Mary when she was 10 years old. So she's seen, now with King Charles, she's seen 5 monarchs. But the rest of us don't really know Queen Elizabeth, don't we?
Well, Robin, thank you very much indeed for taking the time out from your holiday to join us, and thank you for the wonderful work that you do, putting together those fantastic uniforms. It's great to know it's being done in West Yorkshire. Thank you very much indeed.
It's unique. It's specialist, it's incredible detail. And by the way, you might be watching it now in all of this pageantries that's going on, but all of the films that his company have made, the uniforms of Bands of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, Master and Commander, the Russell Crowe film, Harry Potter, The Chamber of Secrets. They've done all of that fine, intricate, detailed work.
So if you want a uniform making, you now know where to go.
But over the past week, whilst the UK has mourned the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Ukrainian forces have broken through Russian lines and begun the process of liberating occupied territories throughout the country.
For an update on the war in Ukraine, we're now joined by the former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been in danger of being overlooked. There hasn't been the same focus on Ukraine for obvious reasons. Can you just tell us exactly what's happened in Ukraine over the last few days?
Well, since the 6th of September, Ukraine had an offensive in the Kharkiv region, of which they've now recaptured 8,000 square miles of territory. The key thing about this, I think, is that it shows you that there is an eroding stalemate. Previously, people talked about a stalemate. But an eroding stalemate, of course, can lead to a landslide. And the same phrase was used in Afghanistan in 2019, but you can reverse it for Russia in this case, because it used to be said that the Afghan people were providing the will. They weren't, but the Ukrainian people are. The Afghan army was providing the power. They weren't, but the Ukrainian army were. And NATO was providing the training and support, which they are in Ukraine. So Ukraine is in a better position than it was. However, the bookends of war are more important than anything else. How a war ends is more important than how it starts. What you can say that at the strategic level, Russia has already been defeated. We like our mission verbs in the military, and defeat means to render an enemy incapable of achieving its objective. So both from a minimalist objective, if Russia just wanted to take the Donbass and have a land bridge to Crimea, that's failed. And if they wanted a maximalist objective, knock over the political polity of Ukraine and incorporate that into a wider Russian empire, that is also failed. But it's worth saying that the UN Secretary General this week did say that a peace deal to end the conflict isn't likely anytime soon, and we're far away from the end of the war.
So, is there now a realistic prospect of Ukraine being able to remove Russia from its country, or is the stalemate just going to be in place over a smaller area of Ukraine?
Well, as I said, I think this will be an eroding stalemate in favour of Ukraine. Like all these things, it's very difficult to say how long that will last. And as Tolstoy famously said, both time and patience are the two greatest warriors. So I think as long as the West supports Ukraine still militarily, diplomatically, humanitarian, and in financial ways, then there is no way that Russia can win. And in a sense, we saw their further isolation from the international community yesterday when both Modi of India and President Xi from China didn't really have sort of comforting words for Putin. He's kind of a bit of an orphan now on the international stage. And that would only get worse if he were to escalate in the most heinous ways. For example, if he were to contemplate use of nuclear weapons. What we have seen in response to the Ukrainian attacks is this sort of missile terrorism from Russia, where they're still trying to destroy and dislocate the Ukrainian industrial, economic and military potential to break the will of the Ukrainian people. But I don't think they'll achieve that.
Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Now, former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan-Smith, has urged the government to withdraw the Chinese government's invitation to the Queen's funeral, saying it was extraordinary that the architects of genocide against the Uyghur minority had been invited in the first place.
This week, China's foreign ministry said Beijing was reported to be considering sending Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan to the funeral.
Well, we're delighted to say that Ian Duncan-Smith joins us now. So, Ian, why did you think that this invitation should never have been sent in the first place to China?
Well, I think that there are two elements to this. Good morning. But the point is that you either invite everybody, regardless diplomatically of what their country is doing, or you start being selective. Well, the government has been selective because they've banned Russia, Belarus, and Myanmar. They've reduced the level of participation for other countries they've invited, like, astonishingly, North Korea. And others. So when it comes to China, the problem we've got is I and 6 other parliamentarians are sanctioned by the Chinese for calling them out over their abuses, not just the genocide of the Uyghur, which, by the way, over 1 million are either in forced labor camps, the women are being forcibly sterilized, children are being put into re-education camps to teach the Uyghur out of them, as it were. They've done the same to Tibet. There's over 250,000 Tibetans that are in forced labor camps. They've been smashing small church groups and churches, persecuting the Christians. They trashed the Hong Kong Agreement and are now arresting journalists and others who have spoken out about their want for democracy, and they've threatened Taiwan. So on almost every scale, and there are other things I haven't even mentioned, and they attack us regularly. They're wolf warriors, spend their time trying to impersonate me and others in the global net. And so it goes on. So all of these are astonishing, really, if you just had one of them. And so for some, they've banned and not for them. And my argument is, they've sanctioned parliamentarians. They've sanctioned others outside too, professors and whole legal chambers, simply because we've been involved in trying to find out what's been going on to the Uyghur minority. So all of this, and so they're allowed to come. And I understand what diplomacy is all about, but if you're going to be selective, then you have to be selective. If you're not going to be selective, then you say simply, because this is a diplomatic thing, then we're going to invite everybody. So I think we're between two stools. And sorry to be so long, but just finish this point. The House of Commons and the House of Lords Parliament banned the Chinese ambassador, the representative of the Chinese government, from entering the precincts of the House of the Houses of Parliament. And that ban has not been rescinded. So as I understand it, that is the reason why Lindsay Hoyle and others have said that they weren't welcome. Now, I understand today they may even be in the point of reversing that, which I'm sorry about, but that may be under pressure.
Now, Ian, the government say that the invites have gone out to countries where there's diplomatic relations still in place, and the people have been excluded is countries like Russia, where there's no diplomatic relationship at the moment. And many people might argue, look, whether we like it or not, we need good relations with China. We do a huge amount of trade with them. And they might say, look, there's lots of countries around the world which have got appalling human rights records and rather unsavoury regimes. And if we withdrew the invitation from all of those countries that we had those objections to, there'd be nobody there. So what would you say to that argument?
Well, you can take it as long as you like. Back in the 1930s, we spent a time appeasing countries that had all of those traits, saying that, of course, it matters, our links with them, and somehow this is all going to work and make them decent people. And we ended up with 60 million people dying in one of the most brutal world wars. My point is always, it's not about just the human rights. That's astonishing enough. After all, genocide is a crime of all crimes that's come out, and they are attempting, as it seems to me quite clearly, to be eradicating a whole ethnic group in China. But, even if you say, well, we don't interfere on internal matters, this is a country that has occupied the South China Seas. The United Nations has told them they have no right to. They're now militarizing it and threatening anybody that sails through there. And bear in mind, our trade goes through that region, and there are disputes, and they've threatened Vietnam and other countries around there. And they're talking about invading Taiwan. They've tried to blockade Taiwan, who has 40% of all of the microchips we use. And this is a country also, by the way, that owns all the rare earth materials pretty much, and produces most of them that we rely on for this very interview that we're doing. Computers, telephones, pretty much everything in modern society. And so all of this is under their control, and we've been completely slack in not understanding that there is a difference between diplomatic links and another where a country is therefore entitled, as it so seems, to smash all the other elements of what we believe in. And bear in mind, as I say, 7 of your colleagues are sanctioned right
Ian,
now
can I
by
ask
the
you one
Chinese
final
government and
question?
attacked on a regular basis. That doesn't look to me like a diplomatic process.
Ian, can I ask you one final question? You turned down a job to go back into cabinet, to go back into government, and instead are looking to be a chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Why was that?
Well, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee point only came subsequently when I realised that the present chairman was being taken into government. I turned down a role in government because I just take a very simple view, having been in government before, unless I can add value to the particular job that I was being asked to do. In other words, I could do something different that others couldn't do, then I didn't think there was much point in going into that. I'm involved in a lot of stuff. As you know, I chair the Centre for Social Justice, looking for how we can help the poorest in society, to make sure that they have the ability to get into employment and to earn the money that takes them out of poverty. All of this is part of what we do. I'm also set up a thing called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, which now has 30 countries involved in it, from Japan all the way through the Five Eyes to the United States, including some in Africa, all concerned, like I am, about the growing aggression of China. So I'd have to give all that up. I'd have to give all that up and sit in the House of Commons, which I didn't think was
Thank you very much
I really wanted to do, to be quite frank.
for joining us this morning, and I wish you all well in becoming chair of that Foreign Affairs Select Committee, but thank you. But that's it for the first hour, but stay with us and we'll be right back after the weather.
Hello, I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. A chilly start out there for many, but sunny spells fairly widely up and down the country, and there'll be fewer showers today compared with the last couple of days. High pressure is moving in. Around the eastern side of that high, we have seen a number of showers during Friday and overnight for eastern and northern parts of the UK, and there's still the possibility of 1 or 2 further showers, particularly for eastern parts of Norfolk and Suffolk as we start off the weekend, as well as the north of Scotland, where there will be cloudier skies, I think. Elsewhere, it's mostly dry. There'll be sunny spells, so widely blue skies across central and southern, as well as southwestern parts of the UK. And with lighter winds compared with Friday, it will feel a touch warmer, temperatures reaching 16 to 18 or even 19 Celsius in the south, 12 to 16 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into the evening on Saturday, we'll see the skies remain mostly clear across much of England and Wales, at least at first. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, thicker cloud gradually pushes in from the Atlantic. That will bring some showers into western Scotland in particular, those showers reaching central and southern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and later northwest England as well as North Wales. With that cloud cover, it's not going to be quite as chilly, temperatures mostly staying up in the high single figures as we start off Sunday, but still a fair amount of bright weather out there, sunny spells for the south and the east in particular, thicker cloud towards the northwest, and further showers to come, especially around Irish Sea coast, western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, 1 or 2 drifting into the Midlands. But temperatures in many places a degree or so higher compared with Saturday, because we'll have lost that northerly airflow. We're replacing it with more of a westerly airflow, and that trend continues into Monday. I think a lot of cloud out there, most places dry, and temperatures will be ticking up a degree or so higher compared with Sunday.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip.
Following the death of Her Majesty, we'll bring you all the details as they come to terms with the life in Britain under a new monarch.
The wait to see the Queen lying in state is now nearing capacity, with the expected wait time at around 16 hours. Officials have asked the public not to travel to join the queue.
And later today, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex will observe a 15-minute vigil for their late grandmother. Both princes will be dressed in full military uniform, as requested by the King.
The funeral on Monday could be the largest event the UK has ever hosted, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to be on the streets of London, alongside high-profile guests, including US President Joe Biden.
And we'll be joined by Representative... And please continue to share your memories with the Queen. Let us know in the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And you have been sending those in to us. Phil?
Dee says, hi, thanks so much for your coverage of our late Queen, who we adore. GB News is the only genuine, truthful channel. Your presenters are full of personality and originality. God save the King.
And Beryl, please think of all the young servicemen and women who have not been chosen to escort the Queen's carriage on Monday. So many of them are heartbroken to be unable to participate to serve their Queen for the last time.
And Jackie says, I hope the national mourning will reverse the current trend of not taking children to funerals. I was 8 when I went to my first funeral, old enough to know when to be quiet.
And Kira, me and my mum decided to make the journey down to London yesterday at 5:30 a.m. We're both appalled to find out that the queue, I guess, had been stopped for a little bit of time, but we're going to hang around and hopefully still get to see the Queen.
And Gary says, the Queen died on my late uncle's birthday, and if she'd been buried as tradition 10 days later, excuse me, it would have been tomorrow, which is my birthday. She was a remarkable person the whole world respected. King Charles III has made a brilliant start to his new role, and I wish him well and hopes he has some private time to grieve after the official period of mourning.
And Trev says, after a week and a half of no politics and a week and a half of total monarchy and royal family, it's clear the former pulls us apart and the latter brings us back together. There you go.
Yeah, I think lots of people would share that sentiment. Thank you for keeping those views coming in. Now we're delighted to be joined in the studio by broadcaster and writer Aidan McGee to talk about the impact the death of the Queen has had on the world of sport over the last week. Aidan?
Yeah, I mean, you know, football was the outlier last week. They decided to withdraw everything. We didn't see any play last weekend. We saw a resumption in the week in terms of Champions League. I mean, that was UEFA who said that football would go ahead. That was kind of different because it's outside our jurisdiction. But we saw the EFL go ahead as well. I went to Millwall against Queen's Park Rangers. QPR won 2-0. There was a floral tribute beforehand. There was a singer local artist. There was the lights dimmed, which we saw last night again, Aston Villa. We saw the lighters held up in the air. We saw pictures up on the screen of Her Majesty, one in her younger years, one more recently. Villa actually are supported by Prince William, Duke of Cambridge. He contacted Aston Villa beforehand, wishing them luck. Steven Gerrard said afterwards that it was great to hear from him. It said something about him, given that everything he's going through now, he was still able to reach out to Aston Villa and thank them for the tribute that they were making. We're seeing 3 games postponed today. Now, the Brighton v Crystal Palace one was interesting because that was going to be postponed anyway. Brighton had requested a postponement because of planned industrial action. The industrial action was then postponed because of the Queen's passing, and then there was a suggestion that it might go ahead after all, but they couldn't rearrange the policing quite quickly enough to get the game back on. It probably suits Brighton to some degree because they've just lost their manager and he's taken his entire backroom staff with him to Chelsea. So that one is not going to be rearranged now. If you think this is incredible, it's probably not going to be rearranged now until next year. Now, it's the World Cup in a way.
The interesting thing about the cancellations, last week there was speculation that the football matches had been cancelled because the policing issue and not enough police. But that wasn't quite right, was it? Because the FA cancelled all football matches, including kids' football matches, amateur games, where obviously there aren't any police. So that wasn't...
Some of the amateur games I've played in might have needed some police down the years, I have to say. But no, there was a weird situation up in Sheffield. We discussed it with Esther just off screen a couple of hours ago. This team just went ahead and played their game, or tried to play their game, and they even made a mockery on Twitter saying, oh, look, the opposition have turned up, fancy them playing here. And they're going to get some quite strong... They said they're going to be dealt with by the local association in the strongest possible terms. So, however, some people would say that it was a bit of a stretch trying to postpone or cancel or stop 8, 9, 10-year-olds from playing. Some people said, well, actually, you know, the younger generation, it's a chance for them to learn the understanding, the meaning of what's happening. Other people said, well, you know, all our kids were at a loose end last weekend. We should have been able to play. Peter Crouch put out a tweet talking about all football, saying it should have gone ahead. 220,000 likes on that tweet. So I think he had a lot of support.
Well, I agree with that things could have gone ahead. And I actually thought it would have been a wonderful moment because people were gathering.
Yes.
Then they were going to obviously have fun and exercise afterwards. They could have gathered, they could have made a tribute, you could have had a minute's silence, you could have talked about the importance of, I don't know, monarchy and royal family. Yeah. So you would have learned something rather than having a bad memory that you've just cancelled what you should be doing.
Exactly.
And the Queen of all people, dutiful to the end, working to the end, would have said, carry on.
The tributes last night were showing what could have been done last week. I mean, we're getting the fall of the end of the daylight at the moment because obviously the seasons are changing. But there's some wonderful pictures last night at Aston Villa. They'd shone a floodlight or a spotlight on the centre circle. They look hugely atmospheric, and that's a club that takes its royal kind of history very, very seriously as well, obviously with the link to Prince William and everything. So, yeah, it could have been done. But sometimes, Philip, you know, sometimes you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. They had to make that in politics, of course. I mean, they had to make a fairly snap decision. They were probably unlucky. They probably could have, the Premier League and the FA and the EFL probably could have done well to speak to other sports and find out what they're doing, homogenise maybe their plans, because then they wouldn't have looked so isolated. And, of course, it's a national sport, and I think there was pressure on them to do something. But the policing was certainly an issue because, Chelsea's game's gone this weekend because, obviously, there's a concentration of the morning over in West London and the police
And the Cabinet Office advice was not to, stop things. There was no obligation to cancel or postpone any of those events.
No, you're absolutely right. And so, as I say, that's why I don't think it was unfair for the government to say, actually, we've got a lot going on. Could you not sort this one out? You're professional people. Can you please talk to each other maybe? But they clearly didn't because, as I say, football was the only sport. I mean, the Great North Run went ahead. There was, quite a few other sports that didn't, but they were one-off events, whereas this was a whole programme. And it was a whole age group all the way down to the age of 8. And I think that decision was made very quickly and probably in haste.
Now, the other people who broke the rules, as I understand, were Rangers, who asked for permission to sing the national anthem before their Champions League game.
Yeah.
Were told they couldn't.
But did it anyway.
And did it anyway. So are they going to face any consequences?
They will.
They've not allowed the crowds to start singing it first, and they joined in.
Yes, that's right. So they circumvented the rules. They were quite smart, actually. I mean, Rangers couldn't have... I mean, there's a strong pro-monarchy element among their support. In fact, I'd say that their tributes were among the most vehement and most highly celebrated of anybody's. They were the kind of pictorial tribute they had in there behind one of the goals was absolutely fantastic, I have to say. It looked a real spectacle. But, yeah, listen, I think UEFA had to stick to the rules because of the political implications of it. But I don't think they're going to fine them too heavily, no.
McGee, thank you very much indeed. Now, members of the public have been warned that the wait to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II could be as long as 16 hours. Our reporter, Jeff Moody, is in the queue.
I am indeed. It started moving again. We've been stopped for about 10 minutes or so. We've just left Southwark Park, where we were queuing round and round and round just to get to the actual queue itself. But we've got our wristbands. And we can go off and get coffees and go to the toilet, etc., as long as we come back with the people with the green wristband. So as long as we stick to our tribe, us greenies, we'll be all right. We're moving now. I think I can see the Thames up ahead of me, I think. Let's sort of talk to somebody in the crowd, because this is why we're doing this today. It's not only to pay our respects to Her Majesty, but also I want to get a real sense of why people are here and how they feel about the occasion. So let's, I've spoken to Mary earlier on, but I'll have another quick chat to Mary. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Jeff.
You're becoming a regular on GBNews.
I am.
So how's it going so far?
Oh, the atmosphere here is wonderful. Everybody's so friendly. We're all here with a common cause. It's a beautiful day. It's a wonderful thing to be part of.
It is, isn't it? I mean, they were talking, a lot on the television over the last few days about this wonderful atmosphere, and I really wanted to sort of see that for myself. They were saying that friendships are forming. We've formed a friendship already, but let's talk to some people back here and see if they want to say hello. Hello.
No, thank you.
Hello.
Can we just go on, just keep going?
Keep going. They don't want to be filmed. How are you getting on so far?
We're fine, thank you. Proud to be here. We're a couple of NHS workers. We've met up with Anne here.
So you just met now?
Yeah.
Best friends already?
Yeah.
We got a long day and night ahead of us, haven't we?
Yeah, we don't care. We're going to wait.
No, we don't care. No. We're plodding on. Come back to us a bit later to see how we're getting on.
I have my phone.
So
we are indeed.
Yeah, you won't see another like her, so she deserves no less.
Absolutely, totally, she deserves no less.
Thanks ever so much, Jeff. Good luck with the queuing. Keep going. Still smiling. Keep smiling.
For the time being.
Keep smiling.
And obviously we're back in the studio.
Well, I just wanted to mention the queuing, if I could, just for a second.
You can indeed.
In page 5 of the Daily Star, and I'm pretty sure it's in other papers too, there's pictures of Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby in the queue in Westminster Hall. And, and there's obviously speculation about how, and criticism that they sort of didn't queue up with everybody else and sort of skipped the queue. The thing I'm most perturbed about is why Holly Willoughby's wearing a face mask, which I can't understand for the life of me. Now, I wondered, Sean, whether she was wearing a face mask so that she wouldn't be recognised on the screen, on the camera, as queue jumping. But, of course, if that was the case, she might have told Philip Schofield, who sort of rather gave her away because, obviously, he's so recognisable. But do you not find it bizarre that she's in there wearing a face mask?
So the face mask was worse than queue jumping. Obviously, we're joined back again by Sean Bailey to go through the papers and what's gone on. So what do you think, Sean?
I mean, look, if you're trying to sneak by, bringing Philip Schofield is probably not a good idea. So I'm thinking that the mask is probably how she feels about wearing them in public, etc., etc. Her issue is, though, she's surrounded by 10, 15, 20,000 people who are not wearing face masks. I think the whole country's moved on from wearing face masks now. It's a personal choice. I don't wear one, she does. I'm not sure why she thinks it's going to be effective.
Maybe she did it to do what I've just done, which is to take attention away from her skipping the queue and to just mention about her wearing a face mask. I don't know. But, Angela, did you not think it was bizarre that she's there?
I thought it was very bizarre, actually, and I do resent people who are just sort of showbiz people, really, going through to the front when people are walking for, hours to get there. And also, in a way, you miss the whole feeling of the relationships that you can make there. Not that I'm suggesting they need friends, but I just think it's wrong. But David Beckham, sorry, brain went. I mean, he was amazing because he left at 2 a.m. but they're nearly there a whole day walking. And initially, nobody recognised him, and he was there chatting and all that sort of thing. And I thought that was wonderful, actually, because he could have easily gone to the front because he's very friendly with many members of the royal family. But he didn't because he wanted the whole experience.
And I think that's what I called it before. It's felt more like a pilgrimage. But I know there has been controversy as well, whether MPs should have been able to go in, whether staff who worked in the House of Parliament should have been able to go in. And some of the reports I've heard didn't quite get it right. They never joined the queues of the public there. You could sort of sneak in down the side, make a third sort of queue. So some people, because it is their day-to-day work, they take an oath to the Queen and the King for where they work. So the controversy there, was that right or wrong? Did it matter that whether people managed to get through because it was their workplace work?
Unfortunately, we're very poor at having nuanced conversations in this country, aren't we? Because the point is, I think if you're an MP, you should go. You should go. You shouldn't need to get in the queue. You can file down the other side. It is your place of work. You're representatives of constituencies, and I bet your constituents would like to think you'd been, so you should go and you should be able to facilitate that. I heard someone say, well, they're not busier than the rest of us. That may well be true, but you don't have the Queen lining state in your place of employment. They do. That's one thing. But when you get to the celebrities, the Philip Schofields of this world, I actually know, join the queue. Join the queue. You really should join this queue because you're no more important than me. You just swanned in at the front because you're on telly all the time. I don't think that's correct. You should join the queue with everybody else because the important thing about the queue, you've used the word pilgrimage, which I think is correct, but people are giving it the time. It is so important. People are prepared to stand on their feet for 16 hours a day. And as someone who's been a security guard in these times, standing up for that amount of time is hard. If you can pop to the front after 5 minutes, I don't think you've had the same experience.
Yeah, exactly.
You haven't invested the same time.
Exactly.
And how wonderful for those people who were in the queue to get there when the princes were doing the vigil.
Yes, that was amazing. I was absolutely taken in when I saw it last night. It was absolutely extraordinary. And all the public who had got there, they were, I thought, have got a double whammy, haven't they, to see the Queen's coffin and to see the 4 members of the royal family. And they did not move an inch. It was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the King had his eyes closed for a lot of the time, and you could really feel his pain, actually. And Princess Anne as well, she had this face that almost didn't move. You could think you were watching models, that you weren't actually watching human beings. I thought it was the most brilliant thing to do. It's not a custom. It has never been a custom. But I thought, what a good idea. I mean, it really brings the feeling of family and monarchy together, which I think is a very good thing.
And outside Parliament, maybe those people who could no longer join the queue, or maybe it was people who'd left the queue, it was absolutely packed and crowded because they actually wanted to see the royal family arrive to go to Westminster Hall. So they were all queuing on the streets just to get a tiny glimpse. Their little bit of history, I don't know, their little way of paying respect. And we saw that, didn't they? The crowds outside Parliament yesterday waiting for the King.
We seem to need it, don't we? We really seem to need them there for us.
It's a reaffirmation of nation. We've had such a tough time with COVID, etc., and we are constantly attacked by people telling us our country's falling apart. I think this is a reaffirmation of the nation of Britain, the fact that we're a positive nation, we're a good bunch, we have lots to offer the world. I think people just want to get in touch with that again.
Sean, Angela, thank you very much indeed for now. Now, horse racing has probably had more publicity over the past week than ever before due to the Queen's love of the sport and her love of horses.
And this week has actually been National Race Horse Week, set up by racehorse trainer Richard Phillips to showcase how well racehorses are looked after.
Well, we're delighted to be joined by Richard now. Richard, first of all, how, I mean, obviously the Queen was such a magnificent supporter of the sport. How big a loss will she be to the world of horse racing?
I think all of us know, certainly this week, after very sad news, that Her Majesty was a huge fan of horse racing. It was her passion, and obviously should be a huge loss. And I think Nikki Henderson, the Queen's trainer over jump, said she was the patron saint of horse racing, and I think that's not far off the right answer, really. She was an amazing person, as we know, but someone who absolutely adored horses in general, especially the thoroughbred. And of course, she bred an equestrian Olympian in the Princess Royal, and who also bred an equestrian Olympian. So it wasn't just a passion, it was Her Majesty's gift, that she had a huge gift for her horses and loved racing, loved the thoroughbred, loved breeding them, and loved watching them and following their progress, and was fascinated by their training.
Now, we wanted to ask you about National Racehorse Week, which was something that you started last week, and it is actually National Racehorse Week
last year.
Yes, last year, sorry. Founded last year, and it's National Racehorse Week this week. I just wonder, why did you decide you wanted to do that, and what did you hope to achieve from it?
Well, I think basically it was well reported that I read an article about Taylor Swift, that it was rumoured that she was going to sing at the Melbourne Cup, but she decided not to because she got a lot of abuse on Twitter from young people who thought that horse racing was not necessarily moral, and that there had sadly been a few fatalities in the Melbourne Cup, which of course anyone in horse racing does everything they can to avoid. But they made a point that they didn't think it was suitable for Taylor Swift to sing at the Melbourne Cup, and I thought to myself, this could only be the beginning if we don't do something about this, because I respect people's views, but I wanted people to realise that the life of a racehorse is a fantastic one on the whole. So my idea was to have National Racehorse Day, and it's turning into a week because there's so many stories to tell. And I'm delighted the first National Racehorse Week was last year, which was a great success, and this year it looks as though it's going from strength to strength. We had 300 people in our yard on Sunday. We have made lots of discussions amongst us all whether or not we should have gone ahead with sad news of Her Majesty's death. But it was decided that after, there was no racing on a Saturday, but after Sunday, information came to us that Her Majesty probably would have wished us to carry on and just show the love and passion for the racehorse and all the great things people do to look after racehorses and all the great things racehorses do for people, whether it comes to mental health or whether it comes to employment, etc. So it's a huge industry in race. Racing is a huge industry in Britain, and it's one we should be proud of. So I thought it would be time to go on the front foot and show the public, open our doors to the public. I'm just delighted to say there's 132 yards been open and various retraining centres and studs this week open to the public, and the feedback's been enormously great. I'm so grateful for everyone getting involved. They've really grabbed it and run with it, and so many people seem to be enjoying the experience of seeing how racehorses live.
I know it's a trainer in my constituency, Jo Foster's really got behind it. She takes her horses to local care homes for the people who reside there and into local primary schools for the kids to see. How important is that outreach work for the sport of horse racing?
it really is important. I mean, it's known as the sport of kings and queens, and obviously, but it's also, racehorses don't care where you come from and who you are. They'll treat you how you treat them, and that's why it's such a sport for the nation, really. And anyone can get involved. And Joe's done a fantastic job bringing thoroughbred racehorses to people rather than people coming to thoroughbred racehorses. And it's a two-way thing, really. But to see the thoroughbred interact with young people and old people is so satisfying. And I think once people witness that, they can see that the thoroughbred's been brilliantly looked after. It has a huge confidence in human beings, and human beings have huge confidence in the thoroughbred. And Joe's work and many other people's work this week has been fantastic. It goes on all year. I always said that racehorses have the life that humans should have. They don't have to queue up with the NHS for an operation, I can assure you. They get everything they need. They get private dentistry, they get physiotherapy, they get a balanced diet, they get an exercise program. And a lot of human beings would be far better off if they had the life of a racehorse. So I think National Racehorse Week is all about showing all these case studies that show this wonderful sport in a good light.
And just finally, Richard, people might not know, but I do, that you've got a great talent, which is of being an impersonator, and a great impersonator of people. Where did this talent come from? And have you got any particular favourite people that you like to impersonate?
Well, as you know, I don't mimic anymore, but I used to, ever since I was a boy. I think you can either do it or you can't. And there's a lot of closet mimics out there. I often find people who are very good at mimicry. And it's said that Her Majesty was an excellent mimic as well. So from that point of view, it's just something you can do. And yeah, I started with Mike Yarwood. When I was a child, Mike Yarwood was on the TV, and I used to copy what Mike Yarwood did, really. And that was mainly politicians. Trade union leaders were big things in those days. He impersonated everyone. So I'm not going to do one for you, but I must admit, Harold Wilson is not dissimilar to William Hague in his voice. That's all I'll say.
Well, if ever the racing world loses interest to you, Richard, you can always rediscover that second career as a mimic. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for what you do with National Racehorse Week.
Thank you for having us on, and best of luck with what you're doing, and thanks to everyone who helped with National Racehorse Week and all your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to you, Angela. Is it true? Was the Queen a good mimic?
She was a marvellous mimic. She would have people absolutely doubled up with laughter. And especially at occasions like Christmas and things, she would mimic people. And, you know, they would be absolutely... I couldn't stop laughing. She's very good. She's got a very, very good sense of humour. We saw that, of course, in the Platinum Jubilee, didn't we, with Paddington Bear. And we saw it also at the Olympics in 2012. She's great fun, but she takes her work very seriously. So you look at her and she's not smiling. She looks very, very solemn and quite austere. But actually, she's got a laughing, bubbling underneath.
And that's why I said I was going to ask you about this. Did she have any say in her funeral, what she'd like to see happen? Did she want to inject any of that fun or any of the care that she had for the country or the connection with people?
She was very involved in it, I've been told. Yes, very much so. I also suspect that Prince Philip helped her because he organised his own funeral down to the last needle, really. He knew exactly what he wanted, and I'm sure they would have discussed it a great deal. And all this wonderful things with the military, she would have wanted very much because they respect her, they're aligned with her, and she loves them. And the most touching part of all, I think, is that Prince Philip, they both had a pact that they wouldn't be buried without waiting for each other. And Prince Philip is waiting for her in Windsor, and they will both be buried together, which, makes you want to cry, really.
Yeah, and Prince William said that she would be looking down now, checking the military precision of what's gone on. Yeah. Thank you for that, Angela.
Now, it's been revealed that the UK government is reviewing its anti-obesity strategy in light of the cost of living crisis, with plans designed to deter people from eating junk food being put on hold while the review takes place.
Earlier this year, the government announced restrictions planned for October on foods high in salt, high in fat and sugar would be postponed for a year in light of the unprecedented global economic situation.
Joining us to discuss the story further is Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Chris Snowdon. Chris, I think Liz Truss in her leadership campaign said she wanted to stop some of these nanny state policies. So how optimistic are you that the tide of the nanny state is going to be rolled back?
I'm actually pretty optimistic. I think there's only one person in the House of Commons who's been more forthright in their objections to the nanny state, and that's you, Philip. And I would hope if you ever became Prime Minister, you would walk the walk. I'm pretty sure that Liz Truss will be walking the walk. I think there's a good chance the sugar tax will be repealed. I think it's very, very likely that some of the stuff that's already actually been legislated for will be kicked down the road or indeed repealed. So that's things like the government telling supermarkets where they can stock their Easter eggs or whatever people want to call junk food, but you can't put these supposedly high-fat, high-sugar, high-salt products at the end of aisle, at the entrance, at the checkout. There's an advertising ban, a total advertising ban for these products online, and a ban on TV before 9 p.m. The calorie labelling thing has already come in, and there's a couple of other things too. I mean, and none of it is the kind of thing Liz Truss likes. None of it's the kind of thing I like. She is now Prime Minister. I don't think she wants to look back on her time in number 10 in years to come and think, there's all these things I believed in and I didn't do them.
The burden on businesses is what she said too, which is true. And that calorie count on labels has proved ineffective. We knew that because we got the reports from America. It proved to be ineffective. So what do you think the government will be doing, if anything at all, when you know that 2/3 of adults are obese or overweight? Then you know it costs the Department of Health $6.1 billion a year. What is the country going to do?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's the job of the public health lobby to come up with policies, and then people can evaluate them and see whether they think they're going to work or not. Personally, I think it's very, very difficult for the government to get people to lose weight. I mean, people need to basically eat less and exercise more, but it's very difficult for the government to force people to do either of those things. So, these are areas of public policy like any other, and just because a lot of people feel rather emotional about it doesn't mean that we should ignore the costs and benefits and look for the evidence behind them. The sugar tax has been in now for over 4 years. It's made no difference whatsoever to childhood obesity, adult obesity. As far as we can tell, it hasn't even made any difference to how much sugar people are consuming. So I think it's been given enough of a chance, and it now should go. And this other stuff that's coming in looks very unlikely to make any real difference. So I haven't got a big list of policies that I think should come in. I've yet to hear one that sounds like it's going to be effective. But that's too bad. If the public health lobby can't come up with effective policies that don't put an excessive cost on individuals and businesses, then maybe they need to try a bit harder.
Chris Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Now it's time to get a news update with Alice.
Good morning, it's 11:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Queen Elizabeth's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin in Westminster Hall later today. Last night, the Queen's children, King Charles, the Princess Royal and the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex held their own 15-minute vigil honouring their mother. Prince Harry has been given special dispensation by his father to wear his military uniform, despite no longer being a working royal. Prince Andrew had been given the same permission. A man who approached the Queen's coffin is being questioned after he was arrested last night. The incident happened at about 10 p.m. Police also detained a man on rollerblades who was skating towards the King's motorcade as it made its way to Westminster Hall. Officers tackled him to the ground, but he was later released without charge. The wait time to see the Queen lying in state is now up to 16 hours. Thousands of people are queuing to pay their respects, hoping to file past her coffin ahead of the state funeral on Monday. The government has warned entry to the queue could be paused again if numbers increase dramatically. Those in line say it's worth the wait.
Travelled down from Yorkshire, north of England, yesterday for it, and we've been queuing all night long kind of thing, so it's going to be nice day, but very emotional at the same time.
We've been waiting 10 hours. Yeah. And the atmosphere's been great.
Atmosphere's lovely. Yeah. We've met lovely people. It's been a little bit chilly at times. Yeah. Got a bit cold, but not not as bad as I thought it could be.
She's served so faithfully for 70 years, and so having to stand in line in the queue for likely 14 hours, really not that much, in comparison to what she did.
World leaders will start arriving in London later for the state funeral. Around 500 dignitaries from around the world are expected to attend, with US President Joe Biden and French leader Emmanuel Macron among them. Liz Truss will meet her New Zealand and Australian counterparts later today. The security operation is set to be the biggest in the Met Police Force's history, surpassing the London Olympics. Royal Pageant Master Bruno Peake says a lot's been done to prepare for the event.
Rehearsal side is the element that will 99.9% guarantee that you will have a successful event. And again, these guys and these ladies who are actually taking part, in the military, this will be such a proud moment for them. So they're going to be making sure that they don't put a step wrong.
In other news, Ukraine says the mass grave discovered in the eastern city of Izium is proof of Russia's war crimes. More than 450 bodies, most of them civilians, were found, some with their hands tied behind their backs. The city was recently liberated after 6 months of Russian occupation. The Kremlin denies it's targeting civilians or committing war crimes. The White House says it'll continue to support Ukraine and hold Moscow accountable. This is what the spokesman, John Kirby, had to say.
It's horrifying. It's repugnant. And sadly, it's in keeping with the kind of depravity and the brutality with which Russian forces have been prosecuting this war against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And we're going to continue to actively support efforts to document war crimes and atrocities that Russian forces commit in Ukraine and to assist national and international efforts to identify and hold Russians accountable.
Police investigators are looking at whether race was a factor in the fatal shooting of Chris Cabba by an armed officer in South London. The 24-year-old's family say they're angry that the investigation by the police regulator could take as long as 9 months. Mr. Cabba, who was unarmed, was killed following a police pursuit of his car 2 weeks ago. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Over the last week, we've seen people arrested or threatened with arrest for holding signs saying "Not my king" or other anti-monarchist sentiments, worrying campaigners for free speech.
To discuss this further is show regular lawyer and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. So,
good morning. An extraordinary time, and Her Majesty was the one constant in our lives, wasn't he? From the Blitz to the Beatles to Boris and beyond, and the outpouring of grief. Absolutely, people have got the right to gather and make those sort of statements. But people are also protesting. And a lot of people are sort of turning around and saying, well, what powers do people have to stop them protesting? And we talk about the fundamental rights. The Human Rights Act of 1998 gives you two fundamental rights. One is the freedom of speech, and the other is about the freedom of assembly. So people can gather and do those sort of things. People are saying that the police are overreacting. And they're using two basic principles. One is Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which talks about things that basically cause harassment, alarm or distress. So holding up a sign saying, "Not my king," they're saying that caused that sort of side as well. You might remember on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, there's the 22-year-old who shouted out to Prince Andrew, basically calling him a sick old man. And the crowd jumped on him. And the 22-year-old, was arrested, apparently for breach of the peace. Now, the question, if you look, and I've looked at the footage a lot of times, there are other offences being committed. And I think you have to balance it between freedom of speech. And it was Voltaire who, or rather, Evelyn Beatrice Hall in 1906 said, I may not approve of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And I think it's very difficult. I think at a time of mourning, people are very, very sensitive. And we need to be absolutely very cautious to make sure we don't infringe too much on people's rights to protest. And I know the police are going through a really difficult time at the moment as well. And it was Stuart Cunley, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner. he was responding to a lot of these postings on social media saying, here's a video of somebody saying you can't hold up this placard, or if you write on this blank placard, we're going to charge you with an offence. What he basically said is that the public absolutely have a right to protest. And I think it's that sort of balance of trying to work that out, making sure that it doesn't encroach upon our freedom of expression.
But where it seemed that the police got it wrong was when a lady was seen just holding up a piece of paper. She didn't want, the king. That wasn't her king. That wasn't what she wanted. And many people would say distasteful, didn't particularly like it. As you said, most of the crowds might have said booed or don't.
Yes.
But did the police need to react in the way that they did? And that's what people were questioning. They seemed to be more forceful there than people who were stopping all the traffic in the Stop the Oil protests and Extinction Rebellion. Didn't seem to be able to do anything there, yet this lady holding up a piece of paper, they managed to
And you're
stop.
absolutely right. And it's the new Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, Section 78 of that, which basically gives the police much more power about restricting protest. And that came about, you talk about Extinction Rebellion, that came as a result of what was the Ziegler case. The Supreme Court said they were obstructing the road and so on and so forth. They were charged under Section 137 of the Highways Act 1980. The Supreme Court said, actually, you can't charge them for that because they had basically limited, targeted and peaceful protest is a right. So basically, these are encroaching on those rules to try and do it. The police are in a really difficult position because at the moment, what's happening is there's this wonderful outpouring of grief. But you have to balance that with other people's rights in order to put a contrary view.
I guess the thing is that, by the way, I hope people are enjoying the live shots that we can see from Buckingham Palace there. We've been showing shots from Westminster Hall, but that's now outside Buckingham Palace where you can see the crowds are gathering there. Andrew, I guess people are worried at this idea that the police can arrest people if somebody's causing distress. I mean, it may well be that what we're saying here on today's show may cause some people distress. And so, are the police right to interpret the law in the way that they have been doing, or is this some kind of overreach? Because I mean, people will say, oh, well, there's a time and a place for everything. Maybe this isn't the time and the place for that kind of protest. But other people will say, well, when do you protest against the institution of the monarchy, apart from when a new monarch's taking over?
And as you say, whatever our personal views may be, and I think there is a time and a place, I think it's a very, very dangerous precedent. We have to have, it's a fundamental right about freedom of speech. And how you exercise that should be in a reasonable way. But those voices need to be heard. In the same way, they could turn around and say, well, we feel offended that you're saying this is our king. And you work on that sort of basis. I agree it's disrespectful, I think, on so on and so forth. I agree there's a time and a place, and maybe the coronation, but we need to preserve that fundamental right.
Andrew Eborn, thank you very much indeed. And we've still got your views coming through. This is a wonderful one here, Naomi. Watching from Melbourne, Australia, I wanted to say a big thank you to all your hosts giving coverage of the Queen's passing with such dignity and respect. You have presented this momentous occasion with so professionally. I'm sure, especially with all the pressure on you, knowing everybody's watching at this moment.
And people who have been there to see the Queen lying in state. Carla said, I've just come out of hospital and against medical advice, I went to London and was lucky to have seen the Queen lying in state on Thursday morning after 9.5 hours queuing. What a surreal moment, one that I would not have missed. She worked until the end, so it was the least I could do. And I met some lovely, caring people who looked after me. And Andy said, after queuing for 20 hours to pay my respects to the most amazing lady, my overwhelming observation is that one person was able to bring together 1 million men, women, Brexiters, Remainers, Trump supporters, Biden supporters, white, black people, Mexicans, Indians, Christians, Muslims, atheists to queue for 20 hours to pay their respects. Absolutely unbelievable.
And we're still joined in the studio by Angela Levin here. And the question I had for you, Angela, that I was reading about, I understand it that Meghan and Harry have been uninvited from the state reception at Buckingham Palace this Sunday, and that would have been hosted by the new King and Queen. Is that true?
Well, what I've been told is that they weren't asked originally because they're not working royals, so they weren't going to see all the heads of state and everybody else. But Omid Scobie, who is their voice for them, said that they were going. He may announce the fact that they were going. And so it's caused a lot of difficulty. But in my mind, if you look back a year or so, when former President Obama had a big birthday party, they didn't invite Harry and Meghan, who had looked to them as a role model. And they announced the fact that they were so sorry they were unable to go. So there could be, I'm not saying there could be a bit of manipulation there. Do you embarrass the royals by saying, we're going, and then they block you at the door? Or does that mean you can then get in?
Well, we had that before, didn't we, when there seemed to be a little bit of, we'll call it confusion, when Meghan and Harry had said Meghan was going up to Balmoral, which was never the case as well,
yes,
when the Queen had just passed away.
Yes. I think this is a general manipulation, and Omid Scobie is often the one who presents it.
Thank you very much indeed for clarifying that, something that I'd just been reading in the papers today. So, something completely different. The soaring price of milk, cheese and eggs has pushed food inflation to its highest level for 14 years.
Food prices rose at their fastest pace since 2008 in the year to August as the war in Ukraine continued to help drive up prices at supermarket tills.
Falling petrol and diesel prices meant the overall inflation rate eased slightly, but it remains near a 40-year high, according to official figures.
Joining us now is business commentator Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Justin, lots of stuff going on at the moment in the economic world. Esther mentioned there about the small reduction in the interest rate.
Tiny.
How much of a cause for optimism is this, or is it not a cause for optimism at all?
Well, put inflation really into the context, how it is calculated. It's done monthly. So when the price went up 12 months ago of what a particular item, 12 months later it drops off. So there'll be certain large rise months which will actually start pushing us down. The other thing to look at is the forward market, futures market for commodities next year is actually coming down really quite dramatically. And so that too will feed into it. But of course, to replace that, we've then got all the issues you were just describing there, all those food costs now coming through. And so, as it were, a second wave of inflation. So you can see when it starts coming down for part of it, but in the meantime, we've got the next lot coming through, and that's going to keep inflation levels up.
And of course, one of the things that may impact on things is the level of the pound, which is now much lower against the dollar. Apparently, it's hit a 37-year low. It's also seems to be pretty weak against the euro to a 17-month low. So how much is the weakness of the pound a cause for concern?
It is a cause of concern when you see how far it's moved. Round about the Brexit vote, it was about 155 to the dollar. And so now we thought, well, it'll settle down. Its range was 125 to 155. Now down to 114. This is really very significant. What it means, therefore, we are going to be importing higher costs. The good news is that, of course, our exports will be better value. But Charles, we're not exporting a great deal at the moment. So I'm afraid this is going to add more to this. So it's all very well to sit there and say, well, it's the currency, it's nothing to do with us. No. We import half of our food, and therefore that's going to suffer greatly.
And next week is a big week, in a way, for the Bank of England's decision on interest rates, something that was delayed from last week. Where is it going to go then? What's going to happen?
Well, it's not difficult to know, really, but there is a possibility it's probably heading in this direction here. Why? Because what do central bankers do when they're faced with inflation? Put interest rates up. Here's the problem. If you put interest up too fast in a weak economy, you're going to weaken the economy. So it really is a terribly difficult position. But rates will go up, if only for one cynical reason. Actually, when you actually do hit a period of slowing economy and potential recession, you want to be able to cut them. They're quite difficult to cut when you're close to naught. So, no, they want to get it up more realistically to that sort of level if they possibly can. And so what we're going to see then, Bank of England decision, probably rates staying up steadily and gently, trying to give us some idea. They won't tell us what the peak's going to be, but we're getting an idea in the States of where the cycle is there. But then also, actually, in this sort of mini budget, what other costs have we got coming through? Remember the big thing we talked about the past few weeks.
And this is the big statement in the House of Commons on Friday by the Chancellor about what else could be happening.
Exactly. And the big thing I can get concerned about, and they say, we'll be able to do something about business energy costs in November. That's too late. This is affecting small businesses right now. So action this debt, well, obviously not today, but action very quickly, please, to try and restore that one word that runs the economy, confidence.
One thing I read this week from Faisal Islam, who's the BBC economics editor, not somebody I normally go to, I might add for
I want to know why
my
you're checking out
information.
his
Well,
tweets.
you know, I just came across it, but he put something really interesting, which was that the 30-year borrowing rates for the government were now 3.5%, having trebled in a year. And I was thinking, gosh, you know, you can get a mortgage rate for 3.5%, and that's what now the government are borrowing over for a 30-year
General members
loan.
of the public, they
That's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, and it's actually a very worrying figure, because what that does is underline the lack of confidence people have in buying UK debt. Now, there's no concern that UK has actually default on its debt. Britain's never defaulted in any of its debt. Even the United States, some of their states have defaulted in the past. So people regard us as a good solid country will repay it. However, this is just showing the level of risk. In order to get you people to buy our debt, please, which includes actually ourselves with quantitative easing, you have to make that rate higher. And so, yes, this too is inflationary. And remember, and again, a point you raised quite rightly a few weeks ago, the cost of this debt, 50 billion a year 2 years ago. This year, likely to be 100 billion a year, or put it into context, just over the amount we pay our entire educational budget. This is very significant.
So all that money that we're spending on debt repayments obviously is money that can't be spent on public services like the health service and the police and things. Justin, thank you very much indeed for joining us and sharing your expertise with us.
Well, it's now time to look at some showbiz news, particularly about celebrities paying their tributes to the late Queen. And we're joined in the studio by showbiz correspondent Hayley Palmer. So it seems that everybody has want to share in the tributes, to share in the praise of the Queen. What have those celebrity tributes been?
Well, I love that Elton John, he was on tour in Canada and he stopped the show and said a stunning speech, and he sang Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, and I just thought that was a wonderful moment. I've seen that on YouTube. Also, I want to bring up David Beckham because I heard you talking about it earlier, but he was in that queue. Apparently, he brought donuts for people, which I'm living for, and he was eating
How many
Pringles.
donuts can anybody carry? How many did? There's hundreds, tens and tens of thousands of
Where
people
he got the donuts
He did
from,
say he
but-
got a bad back in the queue.
Yeah, he got bad knees and bad back.
He got a
You
bad
would
back
do,
from...
wouldn't you? Standing, I'm like that.
Oh, I thought it was carrying so many donuts that gave him the bad back. Yeah.
But I just think it's brilliant. I've seen clips where he's talking to everyone and he got in that queue at 2 a.m. and he thought it was going to be quiet at 2 a.m, but obviously it wasn't.
But you know, this queue, and we keep talking about the life of this queue, there's been so many surprises and fun surprises in that. So just imagine that, who you're standing next to. And in this case, wouldn't we all love it, David Beckham?
Yeah.
And other things that have happened going into, as you'd got there to pay tribute to see the Queen's coffin, and who'd have believed it at 7:30, 7:45, you would have seen the royal family in there. So loads of people have got so many memories from this.
Exactly.
Who else has given tributes?
Well, I mean, I want to talk about Madonna because I don't know if you know this story, when she met the Queen, and apparently she was really nervous. She was at the James Bond premiere and she was practicing her curtsy. And when she actually met the Queen didn't know who she was, apparently.
Here she
I
is
mean,
now.
there you go, brilliant.
Probably looking so demure there with her hair in a bun and kneeling so well, curtsying so well. The Queen probably thought that wasn't what I was expecting from Material Girl.
I like it. And apparently she just broke out into fits of giggles, because you would do, wouldn't you? Just be like nervously laughing. But apparently she then went on to John Cleese, and apparently she said to John Cleese, oh, sorry, what do you do? So, you know, they were all in the same boat.
So they were making a joke of it, because I have to say, and that probably is a wonderful way, she's got a sense of humour, she could pretend she didn't know somebody else, but usually they have incredible information of who's next in the line and what's going on.
Mind, I've got to... Esther will probably hit me later when I say this, but Esther did say, well, I'm with the Queen. She said that Madonna's had so much treatment to her. It's a wonder... It's a wonder anybody can recognise her these days.
To be fair, I didn't recognise Madonna on her latest photographs because she looks 16. So I remember thinking, who is this? So maybe the Queen had the same.
I mean, she's looking quite good at the moment. She's got a toy boy, a new one, I think, hasn't she?
Yeah.
So she's all good. But also, have you heard the story about Tommy Cooper when he was at the Royal Variety performance? and he said to the Queen, "Oh, do you like football?" And she kind of like politely just sort of went, "Oh, well, not really, no." And he said, "Oh, I couldn't have your cup final ticket, can I?" And I was like, what cheek saying that, but he kind of pulled it off, you know. So it's just lovely to hear stories like that. You know, I've had a lovely time sort of researching it and just finding those lovely memories. And I know when I found out about the Queen, I went down to Buckingham Palace. It was about midnight that I went down there, and it was kind of like a little bit eerie, because it's before the crowds got there, but also, you know, quite an emotional time. So,
you know, everybody has said that. Me too, how emotional it was, whether it's surreal, whether it's, I don't know, infectious, the mood of all the public who were there, but it's definitely the end of an era. It's definitely the closing of a chapter. I know a new one's opening, but so many people said, I was moved and I didn't even know I'd be that moved. Was that you?
Yeah, that's how I felt, because I just heard the news. I was in Mayfair anywhere, having dinner, like you do, and I just thought, this can't
I've got to be there. Is that what you thought?
I just thought, I've got to go. So I went there, and then it was a surreal moment, and I just remember you know, it's not often that I'm quiet, but I was just staring and looking at the flag half-mast and just taking it all in, really. So I was glad that I did that. But yeah, it was a very surreal moment.
Justin, we talked to you all about inflation and serious stuff, and you are in the studio now. Did you feel deeply moved? Did you feel that you had to pay your respects as well? Well, we all been taken...
It'd be a lump of granite not to. But also, actually, this is one of the great values of Britain. It's soft power. Look at the message going out around the world, all the issues that people have got, and that here is a country which has actually almost put everything on hold because of the respect for their leader. And, you know, as people often say, we're rather good at this sort of thing. And it's a great advert for Britain. So, all the emotion, yes, but if I'm going to be a hard-nosed money person about it, that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I said pageant power and soft power. That's exactly what we've got. And 4 billion people watching what's going on here. And I'd also like to say, remembering why they love Great Britain as well, remembering the history of the place. So I think there is that.
That's right. I also loved the Queen's Jubilee, where they had the little scene with Paddington Bear. I think we discussed it, didn't we, when that happened? It's just so charming. And when she says, "Oh, I've got marmalade sandwiches in her handbag," that's me. I've always got sandwiches in my handbag.
I just thought it was... I saw somebody said that they met the Queen and they didn't know what to say to her, and they just said, you know, randomly, what's your favourite TV show to the Queen?
What did she say?
She said, The Kumars at number 42. And she then proceeded to rattle off her favourite one-liners from the show. I think these sort of memories are fantastic, aren't they, for people?
She did have a really great sense of humour, didn't she? She really did. And not only that, she supported more than 600 organisations. I know she was the patron of the Royal Ballet, the National Youth Theatre, you know, involved with the Royal Variety Show, the charity work for the arts, which obviously will all be sort of handed out to the rest of the royal family now.
Hayley Palmer, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that.
Now, crowds continue to pay their tribute to the Queen lying in state at Westminster Hall. We can speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is at Green Park. What's going on there, Darren?
Yeah, very good morning to you both. Quite extraordinary scenes here at the Green Park. Just a stone's throw away from Buckingham Palace. I've been here all morning since around 7 a.m. and there've been an awful lot of people. You know, Saturday morning is quite quiet, but an awful lot of people this morning milling around, soaking up the atmosphere, trying to get to the gates of Buckingham Palace. But here in Green Park this afternoon, there are thousands of people queuing up, not to go into Westminster Hall, but rather to leave floral tributes. Just behind me, you can see many of them are actually, these are the people coming out. There are others trying to go in the far distance to a piece of land that's been set aside that people can lay their flowers there in remembrance of Her Majesty the Queen. Delighted to say that I'm joined by Leanne and her niece, who've travelled from Bournemouth today with a little Paddington Bear as well. Just first of all, what's made you come up to London today?
Well, to be part of the atmosphere, really, and just to be part of history. So she's left her little tribute, a little homemade card with her and her Paddington Bear with a little note inside. And so she'll look back at this for the rest of her life. And it's something that, you know, I was going to come up anyway, but I decided, my parents are over there, so we decided to make a day of it.
Fantastic. And what did the Queen mean to you?
Oh gosh, well, she's been, I mean, ever since I saw Diana's wedding, which I was 4, I wanted to be a bridesmaid. I always had the royal family, like the albums for Christmas. So they're just a part of my family and my upbringing, really. Diana and obviously Kate, William, the whole lot. Just love them.
And are you having a nice day?
Yes.
And are you pleased with your little Paddington bear? Are you going to miss the Queen?
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much
Yes,
indeed.
thank
Have
you.
a nice day. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
And there you go. You know, Leanne is just one of tens of thousands of people gathering here in the Green Park around Westminster Palace, around Buckingham Palace today. The King has just left, actually, Buckingham Palace. The royal standard has been lowered here. We're not entirely sure where he's gone off to, but for lots and lots of people, this is a very special weekend, and clearly a lot of people have come from elsewhere in the country, beckoned to London in order to pay their tributes, to pause for a moment, and to remember Her Majesty the Queen ahead of the funeral on Monday.
Darren, thank you there. Well, that's it for today, but we'll be back next week. Alistair Stewart is coming up next, and that's after the weather.
Hello, I'm Ada McGivern from the Met Office. A chilly start out there for many, but sunny spells fairly widely up and down the country, and there'll be fewer showers today compared with the last couple of days. High pressure is moving in. Around the eastern side of that high, we have seen a number of showers during Friday and overnight for eastern and northern parts of the UK, and there's still the possibility of one or two further showers, particularly for eastern parts of Norfolk and Suffolk as we start off the weekend, as well as the north of Scotland, where there will be cloudier skies, I think. Elsewhere, it's mostly dry. There'll be sunny spells, so widely blue skies across central and southern, as well as southwestern parts of the UK. And with lighter winds compared with Friday, it will feel a touch warmer, temperatures reaching 16 to 18 or even 19 Celsius in the south, 12 to 16 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Into the evening on Saturday, we'll see the skies remain mostly clear across much of England and Wales, at least at first. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, thicker cloud gradually pushes in from the Atlantic. That will bring some showers into western Scotland in particular, those showers reaching central and southern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and later northwest England as well as North Wales. With that cloud cover, it's not going to be quite as chilly, temperatures mostly staying up in the high single figures as we start off Sunday, but still a fair amount of bright weather out there, sunny spells for the south and the east in particular, thicker cloud towards the northwest, and further showers to come, especially around Irish Sea coast, western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, one or two drifting into the Midlands. But temperatures in many places a degree or so higher compared with Saturday, because we'll have lost that northerly airflow. We're replacing it with more of a westerly airflow, and that trend continues into Monday. I think a lot of cloud out there, most places dry, and temperatures will be ticking up a degree or so